Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Forecast, and in today's video I will be rebuilding Manchester United. Yes, I do think it is time to do a Manchester United rebuild, and look, United have showed some signs of promise I think this season, and at the same time they have looked at some points like a very poor side. So this isn't going to be completely negative. It's not going to be, oh, get the manager out, get this done. This is what I would do. This is how I would approach the next couple of years, who I think needs to come in, what sort of changes they should be making, and how United should be approaching to get back to where they were. So let's start off, obviously, with the main concern right now around Manchester United and Manchester United fans, the manager. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. So this is the big question to start with. Would I keep hold of Ruben Amorim? I think what I would do with Ruben Amorim is I'd probably give him till the end of the season unless it absolutely turns to shit. And why? Because I don't want another manager coming in and sort of being in sort of a position where he's having to start mid-season. He hasn't been able to buy the players and immediately he's under pressure, and he may well underperform because he's not got a squad that he wants. This is exactly what happened to Amorim, and now Amorim is under more pressure than he would have been this season, and I just think that's not the best approach for the manager. The reason why I would still get rid of him, most likely, unless he was to finish a really high place, like I'm talking like top 6 plus maybe a cup or something, is because I don't actually think he's going to be good enough. I think he's made too many tactical errors, and unless he really sorts this out and he shows that he can tactically be sort of adapt, his style of football's doing well, he's looking like he could take them back to where they need to be, then that's the only time I think I'd actually sort of consider keeping this man in charge. If it goes to real shit, as I was saying, I would just hire an interim. I wouldn't hire the main manager. That's what I'm trying to get at. Whoever I'm hiring, whoever I'd hire as the Manchester United manager, for me, is coming in next season. At the start of the season, he's getting a fresh start. He can get whatever the budget is, probably about £200 million. That's what I'm going to assume. And he can start from scratch on what he needs, what he wants to do, and what he needs to do to rebuild Manchester United. That is exactly what I would be doing. I wouldn't be hiring a new manager and then getting to start with absolutely nothing, because I just don't think that is the best way to approach it. Whoever comes in needs to be given the best chance to succeed, and that's, I think, how you give the manager the best chance. So who could be that manager to replace Ruben Amorim at the end of the season? Don't worry, Liverpool fans. I don't think it's going to be this man, Jurgen Klopp. And as a Liverpool fan, I am really hoping this never ever comes to fruition. But this is the one manager I think that I would have confidence, if I was a Manchester United fan, that could actually rebuild this club. And why? Because he's done that at Liverpool. He's done that at Dortmund. He's done that not on the highest budgets and competed at the top. And he's an absolute great manager at rebuilding, I think, a football club. And I think it would be absolutely perfect. He will bring belief back to you. He did this at Liverpool. That was the one thing that all Liverpool fans couldn't do, is they couldn't believe anymore. And he turned them into doubters to believers, as it all says. And that is exactly what Klopp did. So into the first realistic candidate, and this will be my third choice, and this is Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, I'm really targeting managers that can rebuild a club. Klopp was the top. Howe was very much up there, I think, as a manager that can rebuild a football club. I think he's done that with Newcastle. Once again, he had to adapt, not on the biggest budget at the start. Obviously, he got to bring in his players eventually, but he managed to turn a side that was probably, I think, sort of top half into a top 4 side. And look, he had helps with Saudi backing in terms of money, but he will be able to spend 200 million in the summer. That's not going to be a problem at Newcastle. He's really impressed me, and I think he could be a really good candidate. And what I'm also looking for in the manager is a very good defensive structure, and I think that's what Howe gives you and what he gave at Newcastle. And I think they need to be solid at the back and then build from there, and that is one of the other things I'm looking at in this manager. Then I've got Oliver Glasner. I think this is a lot of people's first choice. This would be my second, and that is because I've got, I think, a better alternative. One of the things that I think is appealing about Glasner is he also plays the same system as Amorim. A lot of people, though, think that the system is a problem. I don't know how much of the system is the problem. I think it's also down to the quality of players and also the manager's ability. Glasner is a top manager, there's no doubt about this. He's turned Crystal Palace into sort of, I think, sort of a top 10, could even be pushing for European side. I think they'll win the conference this year. He's also done very well. You've also got the attractiveness of potentially being able to bring in players like Wharton, Munoz, maybe even a Mark Gahey, because you might, John Philippe Mateta, because he can maybe pull those players away. Look, we haven't always seen this work, though. If you look at in the past, sort of with Gyökeres and Mbeumo to Spurs, Gyökeres to Man United, it doesn't work often. When the manager leaves, the player doesn't often follow, but it can happen sometimes. But I still think this isn't as good manager as my number one appointment, and this is going to be a bit controversial. Diego Simeone. I think Simeone is one of the best managers in the world at rebuilding a football club. And look, Manchester United fans are going to complain, but I actually think this is sort of a bit of a distance memory now that Simeone is this really defensive manager, because he's actually not. In certain games he is, yes, but Simeone is an incredibly underrated manager, I think, and incredibly good at rebuilding a club. He's done that with Atletico Madrid. He's turned them into a club that you look at and go, they're a club that's a top club in Spain. They weren't this when he took over, and he's stayed there for 11, 12 years and kept that success up. And that's what I think is so important for Manchester United. As I said, I want a manager that's good defensively. That's what Simeone gives you. I want a manager, I think, who understands the basics, and that's what he does. He'll make it very easy to understand, and I think he will get the fans behind him after the first 3 or 4 games. I know people are going to doubt this appointment if it ever happens, but I think eventually Manchester United fans will understand how good a manager this guy is. He's also actually plays a lot more attacking football than people sort of don't understand. At home, he presses very high. It gets high energy, and I think he'll really not let players being lazy, and I think he's the perfect manager to rebuild a club. And one thing about him, which maybe this puts the board against him, is he will call out the problems. He will say this player isn't good enough. He will ensure that he doesn't get thrown under the bus as a manager, which is important because I think the players continue to have too much power over the manager. Someone like Simeone, who's got a great reputation in Europe, can do this. Now, a lot of people have been, I think, sort of looking at this appointment like a Mourinho or a Van Gaal appointment. I think this is completely different. I think this is a different sort of appointment. I think Simeone is a good defensive manager, and that's where people are sort of looking at it more of a counter-attacking manager. But what he does is he rebuilds football clubs, and I think he can do this. Someone like Jose Mourinho is going to be there for 2 or 3 years, and then it turns to shit. Simeone won't allow this. He won't do this. He will rebuild this club through thick and thin. If you give him the budget, he can do this. So let's find out how Simeone can do this and how I would finish with Amrin for the rest of the season. So this is how I think Amrin should end the season before I'd obviously get rid of him. In goal, I think you have to go with Lamens, then right centre-half, Yoro, central centre-half, De Ligt, and when he's fit, Lisandro Martinez, I think, is the obvious back three. I think when he's not fit, you probably bring in Luke Shaw, because I don't trust Maguire as sort of the central defender, and I don't think he can play either side, especially if Amrin continues to play the central centre-half basically here, which was ridiculous way at Brentford, and it cost them the game in my opinion. Then I'd go Dorgu at left back. I think he's shown actually some of the quality. I think he's been one of United's actually better players at points. Then I've gone with a midfield pivot of Mainoo and Casemiro. Just get Bruno Fernandes out of the midfield. It's that simple. That will be a way better pivot. Whenever Mainoo's come on in there, for example, the Brentford game, I thought United looked so much better as soon as he came on. And for balance purpose, you can't have Bruno Fernandes there. He continues to play too many rash passes. He's not good enough at tracking his man. He's not good enough to play as a pivot, and it's not working. If you're going to play Then on the right wing and the right wing back, I'm picking Diallo and Mbeumo, and it's absolutely essential, I think, for United that they do play Diallo as this right wing back. And look, people will criticise this. People will say Diallo, he's not good enough defensively. United looks so much better whenever Diallo plays. And the two games he started against Burnley and Brentford, their most threat has been all down this side like that. When there's been no threat on that side whenever they pick Diallo, and it's just nowhere near as good going forward. This is an absolutely essential Diallo plays there because he's an attacking player. If Amrin stays, then sure, bring in an attacking wing back. Try and get someone like a Munoz and maybe fix that midfield. But for now, that's what Amrin's resources are, and I wouldn't give him any more next season. That's what you have to do down that right hand side. You have to go really attacking and attack with Diallo, and that's what I'll do. Then for the left 10, I go with is Matheus Cunha, and this is a position where they've just got so many options, because all of a sudden now you could play Bruno Fernandes as the left 10, you could play Mason Mount as the left 10, you could also play Xerxes as the left 10, you could play Diallo as the left 10, who I definitely don't want to see there, but there's loads of options for that left 10, because they've brought, in my opinion, way too many attackers, and this is the problem, they can't fit all three of these players in. In reality, they only needed to buy Mbeumo and Sesko. I like Cunha as a player, and that's why he's starting, but they could have just used Bruno Fernandes in this role. And the reason why I picked Cunha is I think Man United will be better when Cunha plays, I think, as a team. I think when Bruno Fernandes is on the pitch in that left 10, United, they have a bit more individual quality. So if Amorim continues to struggle, then I definitely would be switching it out and picking Bruno Fernandes. And if he was to pick Fernandes in the left 10, I wouldn't complain. It's when he picks him here, that's where I have problems. It doesn't work. It's not a balanced midfield. He gives the possession away too much, especially when he picks him and Ugarte. I mean, that's terrorism, because neither of the players can progress the ball up the pitch. Ugarte can't play a forward pass well, and he just goes back. And Fernandes actually can progress the ball. That was a bit harsh, but he can only progress the ball 30, 40 yards. He's not good enough at sort of just playing those small passes. He's not good enough with his build-up play. And that's probably due to what it's been coached into him, and he just can't get rid of it. But Bruno Fernandes just plays too many wild passes. And then that striker for Manchester United under Ruben Amorim, I think you have to go your 70 million signing of Benjamin Sesko. In certain games, I think he'll do this, and I think I'd be quite happy to see that front three, as long for that front three in certain games. But I think Sesko needs to get that opportunity. If you spend £70 million on a player, he needs to play. And I think recently he's looked like a better player. Let me know your United 11, and now let's move on to a keep and sell for Manchester United. So here is my keep, loan, sell for the Manchester United squad under Diego Simeone. And whenever I think, they could use a player there, I'm then going to discuss the player options after. So starting off with the goalies, and we've got Altay Bayindir, Tom Heaton, Andre Onana, who's on loan at Trabzonspor, and we've got Lamans. For when I'm purchasing a player, I've set a budget of 200 million plus any sales I think I can make for decent fees, and I'll try and give an estimate fee. I won't try and make it too much, and I'll keep it reasonably realistic. I've done this because that's a pretty normal budget for Manchester United. They spent more than that this summer, and they made sort of 30-40 million in sales. So I think this is a reasonable budget to set myself. So starting off with Bayindir, I'm going to put Bayindir in sell. I don't think he's good enough. I think you could get maybe 5 million, maybe 10 million if you're lucky for someone like Altay Bayindir. Tom Heaton, I'm just going to put in keep. I think he's a good third choice keeper. Andre Onana, sell. I reckon you could get £10 million maybe for Onana. I think you can get 15 between Altay and Onana. And then Lamans. And for Lamans, I'm also going to put keep. But I do think Manchester United need one keeper, as I do worry about Lamans' experience. And you need one anyway as a backup. But I think I'm going to look at a first choice keeper. So before we go into the first option, which is Diogo Costa, what do I want from this keeper? Well, the good thing about Simeone is I think he wants a keeper that's reasonably good with his feet, but it's not an absolute must. I think Simeone's very good at adjusting. He's not a huge believer in playing out from the back, so I don't think you have to worry about that. I think it's more important that you get a really good shot stopper. So, Diogo Costa. I think this is a very good keeper, good potential, young. What puts me away from this is I still don't want to block Lamans' pathway. I don't think they need a really young keeper because they've got Lamans coming through. And I also don't want to spending 30-40 million, which Costa could definitely cost. So then that moves me on to the next option, Jan Oblak, obviously with Atletico Madrid right now. It's a reported maybe 25-30 million for a 32-year-old. He did so well with Simeone. This would be a great choice. Now, why I'm a bit turned away from this is because I've got 2 or 3 Atletico Madrid players planned in other positions as looking at alternatives, and I don't know if we need another one here. I don't know if Atletico Madrid will allow more than the 2 players to leave their club in the summer for Manchester United, so I'm going to turn away from that one. Then we've got Emi Martinez. Emi Martinez was linked in the summer. It looked like the move was going to happen, but it didn't go over the line. They instead went with Lamans. So maybe there's something that turned them away from this. What I like about this deal, though, with Emi Martinez, is I think he's got the attitude to be a Manchester United number 1, which I think is really underrated. Manchester United goalie is very difficult, and if someone like Emi Martinez has got the attitude to be that keeper, I think he's got the ego, but also the ability to do it. I don't rate him as highly as I think a lot of people do. I think the World Cup makes him an incredibly overrated keeper. But I still think this is a very good option. You could also go look at someone like Jordan Pickford if you want another keeper with some Prem experience who's done it at another club. But I think who I'd actually go for is Mike Maignan, who you could get on a free transfer. Now, I do worry with the competitiveness of this transfer, with a lot of other clubs sort of sniffing around this deal. We know Chelsea wanted him, but they couldn't agree a fee. They instead sort of backed Robert Sanchez, and I would be very surprised if they don't go back in. Apparently, Bayern Munich are interested in Mike Maignan. But I think if he's there, get him. If not, I would turn to either Emi Martinez, and then you can use Lamans in a couple of years, or I would go to Jan Oblak, because Jan Oblak has done so well under Simeone. But my issue with this is obviously I don't think they'd let 3 Atletico Madrid players, as that maybe give me a hint of what I'm trying to do coming up. So for now, I'm going to say Mike Maignan, but there's definitely other options for that keeper position. This will mean for the keepers I've spent a maximum of £30 million, and that's if you were to bring in the likes of Mike Maignan or Martinez, who you could get for £18 million. So onto the right back position for Manchester United. And what do you want in a Simeone system? Well, you want a right back, first of all, that's defensively good. He also needs to be able to get forward, though, and I think that's underrated in a Simeone system. The fullbacks are often quite good going forward. Currently, he's got Llorente and Rugari, who are very much get up the pitch. They cause threats down the other, and they're good at crossing as well, which I think is very valuable for his sort of system. So we're starting off with with Dalot. And look, I think Dalot's started off quite well for Manchester United, but the last 2 or 3 years haven't been good enough. I don't think he's good enough going forward, and I also don't think he's good enough defensively. For that reason, I'm going to sell him. And for Mazraoui, who's the other Manchester United right back, I'm going to keep Mazraoui because I think he impressed in a back 4 under Ten Hag, and I think he's a very capable backup right back. So I would keep Mazraoui. So here are my 3 right back suggestions. Let's discuss. So first of all, Marcos Llorente, who's literally out of Atletico Madrid right now. I think he really suits what Simeone's trying to do. We've seen this. He's been excellent under Diego Simeone because I think he's got the ability to be a bit more defensive, but he's also brilliant going forward, and I like this. He's quite big in stature. I don't actually think this is a great suggestion in any way, because as much as the player is a good player who suits the system, Atletico Madrid, as I said, aren't going to sell 2 or 3 players to Manchester United most likely. I don't think they would allow their team to be decimated like this. I think you can pick up maximum 2, so I'm going to move away from Llorente. But if it came down to it and you couldn't get these other 2 options, I definitely would consider it because he's been very good. So the second option I've got is Daniel Munoz. I really like what I've seen from Munoz. He's about 29 years old. All 3 of these options are. He's good going forward. What concerns me is he's effective in a back 5. I do worry about him a little bit defensively because in a Simeone system, at times your fullbacks are going to have to be very defensive and are not going to be as effective, not get the chances to go forward. And where does Munoz's best work probably happen? Go forward. In saying that, he has actually been very good at right back, pretty solid, but I think this would be my second choice option because I really like Denzel Dumfries, and I think this could be a more of a difficult transfer to make done, but he said recently he really wants to come to the Premier League. We know that someone like Manchester City sniffing around, but I really think United should go in big for someone like this, and I reckon this would cost you 25 to 30 million pounds, maybe slightly more. Same with Munoz, I think it's the same fee probably. And what does Dumfries give you different? Well, first of all, I think Dumfries is better defensively when needed, but he's also excellent going forward, and that's what I think is good. He's got that ability to play as a defensive-minded fullback when you need it in certain games in the Champions League, when you want to be a bit more defensive. He's also big, he's strong, he's good. That allows him some good aerial ability. So yeah, I'm going to go with Denzel Dumfries as my right back for about £30 million, I would call it at. If that's not possible, Munoz, and I think this is probably the least likely, but you also could look at someone like Marcos Llorente, and I think either way the price remains the same. You've also let go of Dalot, I think, for about £15 million. That should be a reasonably easy deal to do. So that means you've got a loss of £15 million, but at the end of the day, these sort of losses are going to happen when you're rebuilding a club. So into the centre halves, and I'm looking for one centre half who I think's good on the ball, and then the other centre half, I think it needs to be a good defender, and that's most likely to be the left centre half, the one that's good on the ball. It's not an absolute necessity for Simeone to have centre halves that can play out from the back, but I think one good passer could be useful for a manager like Simeone. So Fredrickson and Aidan Heaven. Fredrickson straight away just get a loan move into you. He's not going to be starting for Manchester United yet, and I just think it's an easy time to give him a loan move. Aidan Heaven, I think there's an argument for Aidan Heaven that he should be in the keep and should play a part in the squad, but I think Heaven could use a loan move to the Championship, probably higher level, and I think Heaven could definitely get that. Matthias de Ligt, I'm going to go straight away and keep. I think he's United's most underrated player. I think de Ligt's a very solid centre half, and he just needs maybe a player that's a bit better on the ball next to him, and you'd have a very good centre half combination. Harry Maguire, I think it's time to let go of Harry Maguire. His contract expires at the end of the season. Let him go and just let him go for a free in the summer. Then at Lisandro Martinez, I would be keeping Martinez. He can be that left centre half that's good on the ball. Now the problem is keeping Martinez fit, and that's why I think United are going to need another centre half. Then Lenny Yoro, I'm keeping Yoro as a backup to De Ligt. Very young, very good potential. I think he's the third choice centre half. Most likely he'll play as Roland, because Martinez never stays fit anyway, so you can almost assume that he'll be a third choice centre half, because I'm going to bring a one first choice centre half to start next to De Ligt. As I said, I think it's really important United get a centre-half that's confident with playing out from the back, whoever they get. So I would be looking at someone like a Bastoni. I don't think Bastoni's a realistic target, though. I think if Bastoni leaves, it will be to a bigger club. He's obviously played in the back three for most of his career, so that could cause him a bit of some issues if he was to join Manchester United. But everything I've seen from Bastoni suggests he has the potential to be a top centre half. In fact, he is a top centre half, right up there with the world class level. But I don't think this is quite realistic yet. So then you could look at someone like Castel Lukebako, who's at RB Leipzig, performing very well, young French centre half. This probably costs you about £50 million. Not a bad deal for a very good centre half. But who I actually think they should go for is Lenormand. And this will be the first player I'd definitely buy from Atletico Madrid. I think you could probably get away with two, and this is one of the ones I would be going for. Lenormand has been very good under Simeone. And I think it cost you a similar fee to Lukebako, probably slightly less, and I think he's been a better player. He's a Spanish international. He's performed well under Simeone. Simeone, he understands the system. He's very good. He's pretty good with his with the ball at his feet, and I think he would fit Simeone perfectly. This would mean that so far United have spent about £17 million in the net spend. So, but this I think it's worth spending sort of £45-50 million on this sort of player. On to the left backs for Manchester United. And look, this is a bit complicated because Ruben Amorim and Manchester United recently have been looking to buy more wing backs. So who are the options here? First of all, we've got Malacia. Malacia is going to be out of contract. He's just too injury prone. So I think that's really easy. Then we've got Patrick Dorgu. I'd keep Dorgu mainly just as a backup. I think it's worth bringing in a very similar style left back to him. And just a very similar to what we did with the keepers, bringing in sort of a bit of an older head in goal. And that will just allow Dorgu to eventually come through, and he'll be ready, but he's about 25, 26, because I don't think he's quite ready to start for Manchester United, definitely not as a traditional left back. Then Diego Leon, I think this guy could definitely use a loan move. I don't think he's quite ready to start for the first team yet. Then Luke Shaw, I think if you can't sell Luke Shaw, it's not a huge problem as long as you can keep trying to stay fit, because I think Luke Shaw has a role to play as like a third choice left back maybe. He could also do some centre half covering if necessary, but if possible, I would be looking to sell Luke Shaw. Realistically, for all of that, you're only getting about £10 million, but you are cutting some wages. And for Harry Amos, I think Harry Amos is just get him back out on loan. He's currently on loan at Sheffield Wednesday. He could probably use a higher level championship move because they are going to be very much in the relegation zone. Don't worry, Liverpool fans, I'm not actually suggesting Atletico Madrid go and get Robertson, but it is sort of what they're looking for, because we saw Simeone this summer. He was looking for a left back, high energy, very good at crossing a football, good passing, that sort of good crossing ability. That's sort of what Simeone was after. Now, some people say Dorgu's that. I do think he's a bit raw, and they could just use a bit of an older fullback, and then eventually you go to Dorgu. Basically what I was saying with the keepers, as I said earlier, and that for me is Robinson. I would have suggested Kirkes, but first of all, I don't think that works because he's too young. He's obviously gone to Liverpool. I think Robinson's about right. He's 28 years old, and he's sort of entering into his prime. In a couple of years, if he sort of runs out of legs. You've still got Dorgu as a backup, and I think this works. I think for everyone, I'm assuming that Simeone can get this side into Champions League football, so I'm assuming that they need this sort of depth. And someone like Robinson, I think, fits the system perfectly. The only reason he wasn't picked up in the summer is because of his injury issues he had going in, but I think he should be all right now. So 100%, I think this is the left-back option that Manchester United should be getting, and I've only suggested them because I think it's realistic. I reckon you could buy him for about £30 million, maybe a bit less, which would mean so far United have spent around £100 million on net spend. Here are some potential United midfielders. I'm looking for two real top midfielders, and this is where I'm going to spend majority of the budget. Starting off with Adam Wharton. And look, I think Adam Wharton's a great player, but I actually think he's going somewhere bigger. Unless United decide to appoint Oliver Glasner, I think Wharton's off to Real Madrid. He's off to Liverpool. He's off to that top level. He's off to something like a PSG. If he wants to stay in England, then maybe there's a chance, but I think Wharton's off somewhere better than Manchester United. So I'm going to rule him out. I've then got Ruben Neves, and this is a very interesting one. He's been at Saudi Arabia now for a couple of years. I reckon he'd be willing to come back to a club like Manchester United. Manchester United previously looked at a player like Ruben Neves, and look, he can play in a double pivot, which is what he'll be doing here. Well, not a double pivot, but he'll be playing with two in midfield. He's been experienced with that at Wolves. So there's definitely a chance that Neves could do this job. Do I think it will happen? Probably not. I think he will demand a high wage, like 300k a week, considering it would also be on a free though. So that is the benefit of that deal. Then you look at someone like Angelo Stiller. Angelo Stiller has been incredibly impressive with Stuttgart, and I think he could definitely play as sort of an all-action midfielder, which is what I'm sort of looking here. And he's young, he's talented, and I think this would cost £50-60 million, and I think this is definitely an option for Manchester United. Then we've got Carlos Baleba, and I think this is a deal that can definitely happen. I think this is the one I definitely think you look. I think you can get Baleba for £80 million. I know they wanted 100. I reckon you could negotiate down to about £80 million for someone like Carlos Baleba, and I definitely think they should be doing this. He looks to be like the next best talent out of Brighton, and I think this is a deal worth doing. So this would be definitely the first one I'd be signing. The other midfield I'd be signing, because I don't think Wharton's realistic, is Barrios. Barrios has been very impressive for Atletico Madrid under Simeone. He's just come through. He's about 22, and there's been callings to get him called up for the Spanish national side. I think Barrios is a real top midfielder. He's worked under Simeone. He's got that industrialness about him, that high press and that energy, which you 100% need in the Atletico Madrid midfield. And I reckon this costs you somewhere between 60 and £70 million. And overall, that means the midfield cost you about £140 million, but you sold about 90 to 100 million. So that sort of means that you've so far spent about 140, 130 million Manchester United, which I think is a realistic and a fair amount of money to spend. And I think you need to go heavy on the midfield. That's what I'd say. The midfield is definitely the area that United need to fix, and I don't think it matters who the manager is if that midfield doesn't get sorted. So 100%, I think Barrios and Baleba would be a great midfield. And then you've also got Kobbie Mainoo, who could come in, and if one of them is struggling, Mainoo can start. If one of them's injured, Mainoo can start. Mainoo could start over either of these. He's that good as well. Right, onto the left-hand side of midfielder, and I think there's only really a couple of players that could realistically play this role. There's some players that could be used as other options there, but I'm thinking more of them being used as a backup there or maybe cover. So the first two options, who definitely aren't options really, are Sancho. Sancho's contract expires. It's been an absolute horrendous signing for Manchester United. So then you've got Marcus Rashford. Now, I think Rashford's going to really thrive in a different environment. I mean, I've said that I think he's a top player, Marcus Rashford, who's just not in the correct environment. I also think this is another player worth selling. You can raise, I think, Barca have an option to trigger for about 26. I think that's a pretty good deal all round for every party. You also clear his massive wages, which I think gives you definitely an option to spend big on a left-hand sided player. Then the other options you've got Ahmad, I'd say, maybe Cunha, and Mbeumo might be able to do something on that side. I am just going to leave them all, and I'm just going to say no, not interested. I don't want them playing on the left hand side. I've got other uses for them. Right, I've only suggested one player, and it might be a little bit unrealistic. Can United make this deal happen? I think they can if they sort of do what they do and they sort of show the project. But this time you're showing it under a world-class manager in Diego Simeone. And I think they should go in and get Antoine Semenyo. That's what I think. I think United need this sort of player. He would be perfect on that left-hand side. He's two-footed. He's very good industrial. He's big. He's good defensively as well, which is really important development, because Simeone likes his fullbacks to be likes his wingers, to be hard-working, helping out their fullback. Semenyo does this with Bournemouth so well. He basically plays as a left wing back at times, and Semenyo's hard-running, he's hard-working. Basically what I think Simeone did on the right-hand side, Diego Simeone's son, on that right-hand side, a bit more of an industrial winger, and I think this is what exactly the signing they need if they were to play the system. He also scores goals, gets assists, and I think this is the perfect sign for Manchester United. Go big. I think this could cost you 60, 70 million pounds, which will leave you a bit thin on the transfer budget for the rest, but there's only one more player I think United need to sign, and I think there's about 20, 30 million pounds left to make this happen. So go get Semenyo, and I think that'd be a great signing. So now onto the right-hand side of winger, and this is the first position I'm not suggesting a player to sign, and that's because I think they're very much sorted here. You've got Bryan Mbeumo, straight away keep. You've just signed him. I think Mbeumo could work in the system very well, and Amad. Two hard-working players, especially Amad Diallo. I think he could excel in a Diego Simeone system, and I think this works perfectly for Manchester United. Those would be the two wingers I would 100% be using on the right-hand side for Manchester United, and I think there's no reason why you need to go and buy one. So finally we have got the strikers, and what I'm looking for in the strikers is one striker who's better at getting in behind, and one that can sort of drop into the pockets, pick up the loose balls, good at sort of out of tight spaces, finding players. And I think the perfect player for that for Manchester United is Matheus Cunha. Just Cunha straight away goes and keep, makes complete sense. He would work this perfectly. And then Joshua Zirkzee I think is actually a very good backup for this. Then you've got Wheatley, who's just out on loan. I think he should continue his loan development. Then Rasmus Højlund, I'm selling Rasmus Højlund. I think you can get £30 million for Højlund. I think someone in Italy would snap your hand off that. A Napoli, who's currently got him. Someone like that. He scores goals in Italy. We've seen this now. I think that's worth it. Then Benjamin Sesko, I would keep Benjamin Sesko. He's going to be the main 9. But I am going to look at signing a bit of an older striker once again to just help Sesko settle in, so he doesn't have to have all the pressure of being the main number 9. That is partly why I think someone like a Rasmus Højlund struggled at Manchester United. And then Cheeto, I just loan out Cheeto. I don't think he's quite ready for first team football yet. So the idea of the striker is a bit of a short-term striker, 2 or 3 years, and just allows Sesko to settle in, so that all the pressure isn't on him. So that's why I'm actually going to rule out Jørgen Strand Larsen. I really like Strand Larsen, but I think if you're going to buy Strand Larsen, that should have been the one you bought this summer for £60 million. I don't think that's the right deal. Then we've got Jean-Philippe Mateta. I really like Mateta, really like what he does as a striker. I do worry a little bit in this system, maybe a bit more than in the Amorim system. I thought this is who Ruben Amorim should have signed this summer. I thought he would have been perfect. I think they needed this sort of striker and maybe a younger one. Maybe this and Strand Larsen. And then finally, Ollie Watkins. Now, Watkins is a bit of a hard one because Watkins is similar age to Mateta, similar fee. Would Ollie Watkins score as many goals as Mateta in the system? He may well, actually, because Watkins, I think, can suit it. He's very industrial, good at pressing. And I actually think that's why I'm going to pick Watkins. And I really struggled between these two. I think there's a very much an argument for Mateta, but I just think this is Watkins' chance to get that move. He's about 30 years old. Give Watkins a couple of years, spend 30, 40 million pounds. That's what it would take to get him off Villa. I think Villa are quite willing to do a deal now. Watkins isn't performing. I think he goes to United and he probably just does what you're looking for. Scores you 10, 15 goals and gets you sort of where you need to be. And then Sesko can take over when Watkins drops off. And I think that's worth it to spend another sort of 30, 40 million pounds on that. And that gets you into a net transfer spend of about 200 million pounds, about what I think Manchester United would be willing to spend based off their summer. Now let's have a look at that final tier list as well as the final squad. Alright, so this is what the final tier list looks like, excluding buys. Now I'm going to show you what the squad would look like and what the first team would look like. So this is what United's first team would look like under Diego Simeone. In goal, you've got Mignon. Then you've got a back four of Dumfries, De Ligt, Lenormand and Robinson. Then you've got the new midfielder Believer and Barrios. With definitely you have Mainu, who can definitely push himself in there if he needed. Then you've got Bryan Mbeumo with Diallo backing him up. You've got Antoine Semenyo. Then you've got Cunha and Sesko, with Watkins ready if Sesko is struggling or if he needs a break or if he gets injured because of his young age. So this would be the Manchester United side plus the depth that I've brought in. Obviously, the only area where there's not an obvious backup is the midfield, but you could also use Mason Mount there. You've also got another 2 midfielders here. So I think that is good enough, and maybe the following season you bring one in. I just don't think the budget stretches that far. Maybe you could use someone like Toby Collier and keep him at the club if needed, but basically I think that's a very strong squad for Manchester United, and I think that's reasonably realistic. That's something they could achieve, but spending probably about £200 million. Obviously, the sales will be very important in enabling this to happen. Let me know your thoughts on this video as well as this rebuild. Do you agree with the rebuild? Do you agree with Simeone being appointed as manager? And if you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel.